All right, guys, before we get too deep into today's video, I wanted to talk to you about today's video sponsor, AG1. So AG1 is a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports your entire body's health. That foundational nutrition that is and should be at the base of everything. Having that foundational nutrition covered is critical. It's like a car. If you have a great running engine and transmission, a good driveline, but the suspension's all out of whack, it's not gonna work well. It doesn't matter that one part of it's great. If the whole system's not working together, it's not gonna do very much. And your body's the same way. Everything needs to be working together. Everything needs to be happy for you to get kind of that optimum performance out of it, which is more or less what we're all looking for. You know, and one of the big things for me is I'm kind of a data, numbers, technical mumbo jumbo person. I like to know the details of things. That applies to building cars, but it applies to everything else in my life. And I like that AG1 is science driven and made to the highest quality standards. You know, it's backed by the way to science, made to the highest quality. Their approach has been published and peer reviewed. They've really gone through and covered all the bases. That's something I really like about it. And then on top of that, it's as simple as it gets. One scoop, 8 to 12 ounces of cold water, shake it up. I drink it first thing in the morning and I'm good to go for the day. It is that easy. No keeping up with different pills and vitamins and gummies and all these different things. Just one drink to start my day and I'm good to go for the day. And I have so much more energy throughout the day because I've taken care of that foundational nutrition. So I don't need to rely on those crutches like caffeine. And the thing with stuff like caffeine is it puts you in that cycle where you go to sleep late, you don't get enough sleep, so you drink the caffeine, but then drinking the caffeine keeps you up late the next night, so you don't get enough sleep, so you drink the caffeine. And being able to break out of that cycle, for me at least, has been absolutely huge. Not to mention my improved gut health, stress management, all of those things. It's a great all-in-one way to keep your body happy and healthy, and they made it taste pretty good too. So that being said, if you are interested in trying it out for yourself, go to drinkag1.com/TaylorRay with 2 R's to get started on your first order. AG1 is going to give you guys a free 1-year supply of AG vitamin D3 plus K2, as well as 5 AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. It's a great way to try it out, get yourself that foundational nutrition, and see how you feel after that, because for me, it's made a massive difference. So huge thank you to AG1 for sponsoring this video, but it's time to get to work. We gotta get this thing knocked out. So let's get to it. All right, well, today we have a new and very exciting project to work on in the shop. We finally have Josue's car in here. So we've had a laundry list of upgrades to do to this thing for a while. He's been collecting the parts and it's finally time to knock them all out at once. That's the way we like to do things. We like to stack up a few projects and hammer it out. So this is Josue's car. He's had it for over a decade.
Well, the 240, it's a hatch. It's a lady, if you want to call it that. LS6, T56, pretty basic.
How many, does it just have the SR in it? Was that the only other engine?
It had, yeah, just SR, but it had multiple SRs in it.
Okay, true. I didn't know if you went through any other engine choices, but.
Yeah, at one point it had a built SR in it, believe it or not.
Wow.
It never ran though.
I've been through that, yep. But so, I've known Josue for well over a decade.
Since what, high school?
Literally the end of high school, drifting, BMX. We both rode BMX, and we met through BMX. But we were both in the cars, me, him, and Raldo. We just became friends. They went to my first drift event with me. So anyway, he's had this car for over a decade. So I mean, this thing it's got a lot of history. It went through a lot of phases. I remember seeing it with an empty bay. I remember seeing it with an SR, then seeing it with the LS, then with the LS6. So this car's come a long way, and it's right at that point that a lot of cars get to where it's solid, it works, but it's that last 10%. It's those little annoyances that just, even though they're small, can make you not want to drive the car. And we want Josue to drive his car more, both at the track drifting and just going on street cruises.
I just want to take it out of the garage more often.
Right.
It lives in the garage.
We're trying to relive our youth here.
I'm saying
so we're trying to drive more. To drive more, we need to fix those little issues. So the biggest thing is the drivability. With the stock ECU and a swap, you just run into a lot of problems. You had a lot of weird issues, high idle, then it won't want to idle, then it'll idle fine. So we are finally going to be switching this thing to a Holley Terminator setup. Terminator is the way to go on an LS, in my opinion. I've used them on pretty much everything, like Frank's Red Hot. Put that on everything. Any LS gets a Terminator or a Dominator. But I got this for them probably over a year ago now, and it's finally time to install it. We have the ECU. full wiring harness, our little touchscreen setup that we can data log on, we can build a bass tune off of, wiring, all the stuff we need to put the Holly in. And while we're in there, we're gonna be changing up some of the current wiring, like the fans and things like that, with this MSD solid state high current relay. These are really a super slick way to do high current outputs, solid state, no relays, less wires. I really like these, super handy. We also have, as you can see, a bunch of AN lines and fittings because we are not only putting an oil cooler in, but an Accusump. Huge thing with an LS, oil control is everything. An NALS will take anything you throw at it as long as it's got a good oil supply. So this is a very critical upgrade for when he starts drifting this thing some more and putting some more grip to it and more angle, all of that stuff. So anyway, long-winded, jibber jabber, very exciting. Again, this car has so much history. He's had it for so long, and we've been talking about doing this for a while, and we both finally just got our butts in gear on getting it done. So, that being said, we got a good bit of work to do, so I'm gonna quit jibber jabbering, and we're gonna get to it. Grab the hood light. We got these new hood lights from Vimpack, and they are slick. They have a base that rotates and is magnetic.
We can't use it on my hood.
Yeah, no, hood's fiberglass, so that ain't gonna work.
Carbon.
Use the features. It's an inside joke. Got to use the features. So Josue's going to start pulling the wiring harness out, the engine harness. I'm going to get up under the dash and start looking at what he's got going on down there because I'm not super familiar with it. And we're going to make some changes. And yeah. So as I said, Josue's starting in the engine bay. I'm going to start looking up underneath the dash to see, take my first look at the wiring he has going on here for the chassis stuff. So we basically need to pull the ECU out, the entire engine harness out, as well as the chassis wiring for the high current output. So over the years that Josue's been working with me, you know, we've built quite a few cars and we've done the wiring on them. And he's seen the kind of different methods that you can use, you know, using a PDM like we have in the VET or the MSD solid state relay like we did on the truck. And after seeing all the different methods and all the different ways you can kind of approach the same goal, he had come up with a plan on how he wanted to rewire everything while we're in here doing the Terminator, because when we put the Terminator in, we're going to have to wire up a few things anyway. So we're going to be in there cutting and splicing and hacking. So into the rabbit hole we go. Might as well make those other changes while we're there. Now you got to be careful with the while you're there, as they will swallow you whole, because you can end up down at a bottomless pit of while I'm here, I'm going to do this. While I'm here, I'm going to do that. While I'm here, I'm going to do that. And then the car never gets finished. So it is a delicate line to toe, but this is a good while you're there. This is one that makes sense. So while we're here, we're going to redo this wiring as well and get this all tidied up.
You want that thing?
All right, here's our old panel. We are going
Where's
to
the
be...
trash can? Just kidding.
Obviously, there's some stuff on here this doesn't cover, but more or less, we're going to get rid of all of this, these bus bars, this relay panel with these little relays, this fuse panel, and replace all of that with this one MSD solid state relay. Simplification. Ideally, if we can get rid of enough stuff on here, we'll be able to mount the ECU and our solid state relay on here and really clean this up and simplify it for any future troubleshooting. We'll have a bunch of stuff to look through. So once we had the chassis harness panel out of the way and moved out, we could get the ECU out, and then we could go ahead and pull the old engine harness out. Now this is already a pretty nice engine harness for the stock ECU, but the Terminator one is a little bit simpler and comes all pre-loomed like that, so we don't have to do anything to it. So I decided to go ahead and make just a new panel. Instead of trying to take apart this old panel that has a bunch of different holes in it and stuff, I've got some scrap aluminum. I'm gonna just make a square panel, and the idea is to fit both the Terminator and the MSD solid state relay on this one panel. Now it's a little bit tight on this scrap piece, but I think we can make it work. I've just got to maximize this square area when I cut this out and try to place everything in the right spot. So I get the main shape cut out, and then it's over to the belt grinder. I love this thing. I thought I would use this a decent bit. I did not realize just how often I would use this belt grinder. I use it on, if I ever have to cut anything, it's going to the belt grinder. The belt grinder is a lifesaver. So we got the edges rounded just, you know, for that little bit of fit and finish. Got it cleaned off, deburred, so that way it's nice and smooth, nothing to catch your hand on. And then I started marking out our holes. So we're using these transfer punches. They basically go into a given size hole. You tap it, and then you know your hole is dead centered in the hole of which you're going to bolt through. So it's just an easy way to make sure all your holes line up. That is one of the biggest improvements I've made when it comes to fabricating and building cars, is getting holes in the right spot. I used to struggle so hard with that, trying to just eyeball stuff, and then you got to wallow the hole hole out, there is nothing worse to me. So I always try to take my time on marking the holes, and it generally saves you time in the long run. So we've got 2 small holes for the through bolts of the MSD solid state relay, and then we've got 4 holes that we need to put rib nuts in. I like to go with rib nuts in any scenario that I can, because that means we don't need to use a wrench. Less tools, more better, right? I prefer not to have to get back there with a wrench, and then you're trying to keep track of a bolt and a nut and a washer, and it just becomes a hassle if you've ever got to take something apart. So that's something that I really try to focus on when I'm doing anything, is making it as serviceable as possible. Now, hopefully, we won't ever have to take the ECU out of this car, because it should work just fine. But if we ever do, it's easy peasy. Just unscrew the bolts from the front side, you're good to go. So with the ECU and the solid state relay block mounted, it's time to get the wiring harness in so we can see what kind of length we have left, so that we know where we want to mount that panel with the ECU on it. So these harnesses are a pretty good length for coming out the passenger side. They're pretty much set up to come up through the passenger side. So we should have plenty of leeway to really put that panel wherever we want, but better safe than sorry. We want to get the wiring harness routed in first before we commit to mounting the panel somewhere, and then find out that our wiring doesn't reach. So since this is kind of Josue's forte, this is his specialty and something he really likes to do, he went to town on routing and tucking this harness. When it comes to tucking a wiring harness and trying to keep it super clean and out of sight, it's really a game of compromises. You know, you might see more of the wiring here to see less of it there, so it's really personal preference. And these harnesses are really easy to tuck, but you definitely got to think your way through it to get it just right. All right, just like that, 19 minutes to route this entire wiring harness. You can see how slim this harness is. I love a nice, clean, minimalistic harness. You can barely tell anything changed in here. Most of the wires are nice, hidden, tucked away, but that's all pretty well done and dusted. Josue's just working on hooking up the coil pack grounds. They absolutely have to go to the back of the head, which is great for performance. It works well. You got to think your plug's in the head. However, very, very difficult to get to the bolt and tighten it, especially in a swapped car where the firewall is so close. So he is finagling with that. But yeah, once that's done, I think we're pretty well wrapped up as far as the wiring goes in the engine bay. It's really just plug and play, like the definition of it, I guess. So in here, we got to wire a few things, you know, some stuff that's already with the car. Got to plug into the ECU, which are these plugs here. We've got key on power, ground, constant power, fuel pump out. Just a few things to wire in here, and that's pretty much it. So super simple. So we made this little plate. We've got the ECU mounted with rib nuts. I didn't have any rib nuts for this thread bolt, so it is through bolted, but decided to mount the MSD facing out because I think it'll be easier to service, but I'm also second guessing it. I might flip it back. But either way, we got our little plate, all this self-contained versus all this stock ECU and all the bus bars and fuse boxes that we had on there before. So definitely a drastic improvement in simplicity. So anyway, basically we need to figure out where we're gonna mount this and wire everything up. And then kick the tires, light the fires. Pretty excited about that. I've got a wager of no specific amount that as long as we didn't cross any wires anywhere, plug something in wrong, or do something wrong, if everything is correct, it'll fire up first try on the, what do they call it, Setup Wizard base map. I have confidence. I have faith.
I believe.
So with the Holly, we have an option of using an external map sensor and plugging it in, or using the internal map sensor that's built into the ECU. And on an NA application, you can use the internal one, and to me, it's a lot simpler. We basically just have to run a hose from the intake over to the ECU, and we're good to go. So I got the hose hooked up there, and Josue started working on routing the main power and ground wires. That is another thing kind of unique to the Holly. They include this long power harness that is meant to be run directly to the battery, and it's very important that it's ran directly to the battery, so that way you get a good clean power and ground. If you're tapping off something like the starter, when it draws all that current to start, it's going to start drawing power away from the ECU. So it's important to have a clean line for both power and ground going directly in, so you don't get any weirdness. So once that was done, we knew where all of our wiring was, so we knew where we could mount the ECUs. So Josue got these holes marked and drilled. I went ahead and cleaned them up with a countersink. It's a nice way to clean up a hole, get rid of all those burrs hers and just have a nicer finished product. It's all about fit and finish. So it's nice that these studs worked out. It's always great when you don't have to add anything to a car to mount something. You can use the existing hardware that was there to mount something else originally. So while he was under the dash working on the wiring, I went ahead back to the engine bay to remove our MAP sensor. So since we're running this car with a MAP sensor, we're going to be running a speed density tune. So we no longer need the MAP sensor, and that is a big, ugly, bulky thing that is in the way and forcing the filter to be kind of shoved down into the corner. So we got rid of that, cleaned that up, and Josue was just plugging away on wiring all of this up under here, trying to keep everything nice and clean. So he's got this one post terminal to tie all the power wires together. You know, you've got power coming in from the battery going out to the starter and various things, including our MSD solid state relay block. Now this post is a little bit short for this many wires, but it's definitely better than running one of those junction blocks with a bunch of different posts for just a few wires. It's right on that teetering edge of being a little too small, but it works and it's way cleaner. So he got that done, and now it's the finer details, the smaller wiring. So we've basically got our outputs from the ECU that are going to the MSD to tell it when to turn certain things on. So we need the ECU to send a signal to the MSD to say, hey, turn the fuel pump channel on and turn the fuel pump on. So getting those wired from the ECU to the MSD, and then the power from the MSD out to each individual item, the fans, the fuel pump, things like that. So wiring is one of those things, man. It's tedious and it's hard to make it future serviceable but also clean, and it is a balancing act. And Josue's doing a good job keeping this nice and tidy and getting it all knocked out, done and dusted. So he gets the main power plugged in, and that is it for the wiring under the dash. We are done. So the last step really before we can try to fire this thing off is to get the new wideband sensor tossed in. The ECU relies heavily on that for its self-learn and closed loop features, and then tidy up these old narrowband O2 sensor wires, get them tucked out of the way, and then we're about ready. It's about moment of truth time.
Check in there.
Take a gander real quick. So the blue wire is your fuel pump, correct? Yes. And then the red wires are your fans. Yes. And we got that. The fans won't work until we program that. We got to do that, which is why we're going to need that USB. Green wire in, power, boom. Yeah, I think we're good. Moment of truth. Hook that battery up, boy. Got boot up sequence.
Self power.
First thing we need to do is set the TPS. And like, if you ever have an issue, reset your TPS, because it will not run if the TPS is not set correctly. Boom. So it's reading the TPS. Then we go to wizards, GCF wizard, injection. So we're just going to go through and set all our parameters. GM, LS, next. 8 cylinders, next. Cubic inches, 350. Post target idle speed. And your cam.
Not massive, but it's not small. Not medium, probably big.
Okay, so we'll go 235 to 260. Fuel pressure. You have the Corvette regulator?
Yes. I want to say it's...
That should be 60 or like high 50s.
Right, that sounds accurate.
Injectors. They're stock, right?
Yes.
Stock LS6.
Yes.
1256142. Power adder none. Internal 1 bar. Start. This is gonna flash it. You ready? Oh well, the fuel pump. Is the fuel pump run?
I didn't hear it keep going. But...
Let's see. So the fuel pump's not going. So that's going to be our first diagnosis that we need to figure out.
Should it have been?
Yeah, it should be running because that should be priming.
Green on top.
I wonder though, because the fans... Are you sure that blue wire is the fuel pump?
Yeah, because the other two, so the other blue one would be for the other fuel pump if it was, and then the green one's for the Accusump.
Because the fans are priming like the fuel pump. You know what I mean?
Right. That which it.
The fans shouldn't be going because we don't have anything set up on that output. So let's... All right, we figured it out. Simple diagnostics. We used a multimeter to ohm out and determine which wire was which. The wire that we thought was the fuel pump
I was assuming.
is one of the fans, which makes sense because the fans would click on for the amount of time a fuel pump would prime. I'm like, are you sure that
No, because both red wires.
You would think both red wires were for the fan, blue wires for the fuel pump, but one red wire fuel pump, one red wire, one fan, blue wire, other fan. So we just got to switch some stuff around on the MSD, and then we should definitely get fuel pump prime because we had fan prime. And then we can try to start it, but there's no point in trying to start it until we got fuel pressure. Like I said, I said it would start first try as long as we didn't mess anything up, which pretty much guaranteed. There's at least one little thing. There's always something. I don't care how long you've been building cars, working on cars, doing engine swaps, you're always gonna forget something. I don't think there's ever been a time in my life where I haven't forgot one thing on an engine start with a big fresh amount of parts. It's just part of it.
But that's why you diag and you jump on. As soon as I heard it, I was like,
Yeah, I was like, maybe, there's a chance, because I was like, we needed to figure out what one fan was running, which it was only one fan. All right. There we go. Now we got fuel pressure. All right, you ready?
I think so.
Wide. We didn't get start first try. My wide.
Definitely a setting issue. That sounds more accurate.
Oh no, I know what the problem is. That ignition wire. There's certain ignition wires that stay on all the time, but there's certain ones where when you crank, it takes power, so it's killing the ECU. So we just need to find an ignition wire that has power when we crank. So still something we did wrong. There's still hope.
Small technicality. All right, let me reach in here and see what I can find.
Play the technical difficulty noise in your head. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. All right, take 3. First start, try number 1. Never tried before, action. It wasn't starting. I was like, man, talked all this game.
Silly issues. She's alive.
It does have 66.
That
First
rattling
try.
was freaking me out, but it still lived.
Oh yeah, first try, dude.
First try. Nice.
How do you feel?
I feel excited.
I mean,
awesome.
that's no touching up, no setting the idle air control valve, no nothing. That's literally just base wizard map that it created out of freaking thin air.
You were just clicking away for like not even 5 minutes, and then if I would have hit the wires right, I was just I didn't even look at my own diagram.
Like I said, that doesn't count. That doesn't count as our try. My bet was that the Terminator's base map that it creates would fire it up first try.
Yes, and it sure did.
As long and outside of the factors of us, because there's always something.
No, that's exciting.
Stinks in here now, Josue.
Sorry, it's a stinky car. It is. I think it's 1, obviously old LS. 2, I don't drive it enough.
I think it's just because it's a 240, it has to stink.
LS
It's
240,
just 240s. 240s have to stink. It's just it's a law of nature. Like you get an SR 240, all you smell is exhaust fumes. You get an KA 240, exhaust fumes. Get an LS 240, exhaust fumes. It's gotta stink. Get it off the lift,
Yes, sir.
pull it outside, and start tinkering with the fine details. It's already running pretty good.
Good. It's started up.
I barely turned the key.
It's already 9 different. This is all I wanted. This is it, dude.
I'm stoked. All right, we're gonna start messing with this. well, another day. Today is basically our last day to get everything done on Josue's car here, because tomorrow we are heading to the track. We are going to be doing a Pro-Am competition with the old vet here. So we got to get that thing loaded up, do all that stuff. So we got the rest of today to finish this thing out. I think we can do it if we keep our heads down. We did have to take a moment to fix the old turbo truck here. This thing was sitting on the lift with the windows down, and when we went to pull it out to bring this thing in, the window regulator broke and we couldn't get the window up. So we took it apart, got it up. We've got the regulator swapped, so this thing's back in business, just needs wheels. But anyway, I'm gonna get this thing out of the way. We're gonna drop this thing down because we've got to fix a massive brake fluid leak. That's kind of pertinent to being able to drive a car. You gotta have working brakes, and then get back to work on our upgrades, including the Accusump here and the oil cooler. So we got a pretty tall order to get all this done today, but at least we got the base project done of getting this thing Terminator swapped and getting it running. That was really important. If it doesn't run, you can't drive it home. So I'm glad we at least got that baseline figured out. Everything else is a bonus. So anyway, I'm gonna quit jibber jabber. I'm gonna get the truck out and get back to work on this thing. So it was time for the finishing projects before we could go take this thing for a rip and see how it drives. So I started working on determining where to mount the Accusump, but the battery was just right in the way. So I think we're gonna have to move this battery to give us a better spot for mounting the Accusump. It is a big 3-quart unit. It takes up a lot of space. So while I was working on that, Josue got to work on replacing the brake cylinder as well as the brake booster. He developed this leak on the way over here, and fortunately we were able to get the parts in time to replace it and get it sorted out so that we can actually take this thing for a little drive. You kind of need brakes for that. So while he's knocking out that the less fun project, I got to work on the satisfying project of remounting the battery. He also has this new battery tray that he's been meaning to put in, so it's kind of a 2-for-1 special. We get to move the battery to fit the Accusump and get to use this new battery tray. So after verifying that there is nothing that we're going to drill into underneath, as long as we're careful and don't drill into the fuel tank, I went ahead and drilled a couple of holes to add some riv nuts. There was already some here for something being mounted there previously, so it was pretty easy. I just needed to add 2. Boom, pop the battery in, and we've got the battery relocated. We've got the new box in, and now we can work on mounting the Accusump. So while I was doing that, Josue was finishing up getting all of this detached. Anything to do with the brake booster requires laying up under the dash and getting around in a weird area. It's not the most fun project, so this is something that'll be nice to have knocked out before we move on to anything else. So we got the new booster in, got that tightened down, and then Josue decided to work on putting the brake cylinder back on. Now there's an adjustment, and it's important to have that adjustment right, otherwise your brake pedal won't be in the right spot. So once he had it all adjusted, he was able to throw the brake master cylinder back on, get everything tightened back down, get the lines back on, and we were pretty well wrapped up with that project, aside from bleeding the brakes, which is always a little bit of a chore, but we've got something to make it easy. All right, we got the battery relocated just slightly, and the new battery mount in nice and tight. The wires still reach no problem, almost even better really than them going into that box. I hate those plastic boxes. And now we have our prime real estate to mount the Accusump here, where we still got room to get a fitting on the end. We also have this firewall piece to go in, but more importantly, more pressing to work on before we dive into that stuff is the brake system. We've got our pressure bleeder here. Basically pressurize the system. It refills the fluid as it goes out. Josue will go crack the bleeder on the furthest one. Once we've got clean fluid, no bubbles, we move on. Boom, boom, boom. So anyway, jibber jabber. Point is, bleed, brakes, party, maybe. So we went ahead and pressure bled the brakes. It was a little bit tricky because we had to use this universal top for the master cylinder, but we got it done. We got that sorted. So now the car is effectively ready to drive. But before we do that, we want to get this Accusump mounted, get this project knocked off the chopping block. That way we know it's done and it's one less thing to worry about. So Josue got the clamps marked, got the holes drilled, and we're going to use, guess what? Some more riv nuts. This is definitely a scenario where you really kind of have to use a riv nut because otherwise you're going to have someone under the car putting a nut on the back side of the bolt, and that does not sound fun. So once he got the riv nuts in, he was able to get the Accusump back in, get it bolted down, and he's officially got an Accusump in the car. It's not doing anything currently. We still got to plumb it, but it's in the car, and that counts for something.
I mean,
that ain't going nowhere.
really would.
You gotta say it. All right, well, we got the brakes done. Fluid is filled, cap is back on, brakes are bled. We did get the Accusump mounted. Pretty stoked on that positioning with the battery and all that. I think that panned out really well. Now, we aren't gonna be able to plumb it just yet because we need a different oil filter adapter for the pan. 240s run a front sump pan. This is a GTO pan, and this setup's just not gonna work for that location. If we put it where it's supposed to go, it's gonna run into the alternator. We can't flip it because there's a lip there. So Josue's found a specific one that should work, flipped, and clear everything. It's just one of those things with swap cars. It's something that takes a while to learn, but you know, these aftermarket parts aren't necessarily designed to work together. Like this is designed for a GTO pan, but in a GTO with a GTO accessory drive, not in a 240 with a different accessory drive. So there's some trial by elimination that you end up having to do when it comes to building cars, of just finding out if the pieces all work together, because they might not be designed necessarily with each other in mind. So that, just a little situation we ran into. But he's got the cooler, we figured out where we're gonna mount that, got that squared away, so that'll be easy peasy. But that being said, there's still one major thing left to do. It's time to go take this thing for a drive. We've got the base tune in there, self-learn's working, we've verified all our inputs and outputs are working, fans come on, they turn off, everything, all of that is good. We've got the idle set. So at this point, there's nothing left to it but to do it. It's the moment of truth. It's time to take this thing for a drive. I'm pretty excited to see how it does. I did look at the self-learn on the base map, and it is making some big corrections, so I may have to play with that, but I'll bring the laptop and we'll see if we can get this thing running a minute. You excited?
I'm super excited. I'm a little nervous, but I mean, everything should be
yeah,
fine.
but that's
always. It
always
just takes the car to the next level. It's pretty exciting to have a standalone, we'll call it.
proper standalone.
Proper standalone.
All right, let's do this thing. We do think we're fighting a bit of an issue with the throttle body being too big for this engine. This is a 5.7 with a reasonable cam. It's got a 102 mil throttle body, which is huge. La Miata has a 6.2 with a massive cam, and I still only run a 92, so I think it limits our window on getting the IAC to be in its happy range because there's so low air velocity because the throttle body is too big. That's my thought. We were gonna throw a stock intake I had back on it, but I didn't have a throttle body. So we're gonna start with putting a 92 on it, but we'll see how it is as is. It might be fine once we tinker with it a little bit more, but I think that's something we're fighting. A little sound clip of our idling. All that moisture coming out, Florida things. Aside from like me doing a little drifting at the track. Give it like it's a little like 20%, 10% throttle. Okay. Yeah. It's just riding in the mid-14s when we're cruising, which is good.
Tell me what you need, tuna. That's the tuna.
But yeah, no, it's good. I just wanted to make sure that when you gave it a little throttle, it didn't try to lean spike. That it would start to add some fuel, which it did pretty much immediately.
Keep going straight or?
Yeah, we'll keep going straight.
Steady 50.
Let off the throttle completely. Now get back on the throttle. Okay.
Is it here?
I was just making sure the TPS was going to zero. Yeah, you can go left here if you want to make sure we don't go too far.
I mean, it's just
Because
that.
past this, you can't go much. Well, yeah, whatever.
I mean, it's a nice little cruise, and then tomorrow.
I forget there's like a 10% little and then push the clutch in and take your foot off the gas.
Now?
Yeah, give it a little. Just make sure it comes down idle. Yep.
That is a good way to check it. Yeah.
Because that's usually when it'll happen. You give it a little gas and then it just.
Yep. I'm excited, dude. Thank you.
Yeah,
like the brakes were like a little side step, but like that's even better than ever, probably, hopefully. And then the ability to like keep playing with it. Just want to try to drive the car a little more, and this makes me want to
well, test drive went well. Car ran perfect, cooled great, came back to idle every time. We've still got a little bit of work to do on the startup. You know, to me, it needs to be able to where you can just reach in with the key and start it and not ever have to worry about touching the gas. And there's no reason we shouldn't get there. I do think that throttle body, that 102 is not helping our cause. So I think that'd be step one. Maybe we'll switch to a plastic intake on it. But I think throttle body first and then go from there. So anyway, we didn't get everything done we wanted to do. Really wanted to get the Accusump plumbed in and the cooler plumbed in, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes parts don't work out, but we did go from a car running a stock ECU and a big switch panel board to a car running a Terminator and an MSD solid state relay. Cleaned all that up a lot. It runs and drives a lot better. I'm pretty happy with it. How do you feel? Yeah? You excited to drive it more?
Yes, that's the goal. That's the plan. Now I have no excuse.
Right.
Yep.
It was very annoying before with the idle, I'm sure.
Right, and there was nothing really I could do. So
No.
now I can we can check the log. You logged for me.
Yeah,
Check
there's a
the-
log on
do
there.
that, and then just tinker with it.
Yeah, now you
I'm
can start
excited.
playing with the software and getting
Yeah,
familiar.
get familiar. Yes, I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course, dude. I'm stoked. So anyway, that being said, we are out of time. We got to start getting this old girl ready to go do some competition drifting, which should be hopefully a good time. Hopefully. We've been striking out on getting through competition. So if we can at least get there and the car works, I'll be over the moon. So that being said, I'm going to end it here. But I do want to say thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I sure hope I'll get to see you next time. Goodbye.